Before the dawn of the sun, I keep my eye on the moon. Taking off on latitude like the witch on the broom. Flying balloon, solar disc rising over lagoon. Bending a spoon, God is thought a symbol of the baboon. Greetings. Welcome to the space called House of the Hood. And I hope everybody's doing well physiologically, emotionally most especially, and mentally most especially. And I mentioned those two most especially simply because today's episode is going to be solely based on those two as the most essential constituents that needed in now the making up of the microcosm of a human being. So I don't know, man, but of late I've been seeing a whole lot of emotional upheavals, in my personal surrounding spaces. I've been seeing wars, a whole lot of misunderstandings. Also, given that it's a Mercury retrograde, we are in the phase of a Mercury retrograde as far as our astronomy is concerned as well. So just about yesterday, I saw two taxi drivers fighting, literally manhandling, each other over, a petty thing, over a stupid thing, fighting over, the lane. So I've been seeing a whole lot of, sadistic acts, just like what happened last week at Maponya Mall. These Uber drivers, they burnt each other, over, something stupid, because now the money hunger has driven us to, a sense of greed, and a lack of empathy, for one another over cash, I think a month ago, I've read that, like, at the mall, one of the mall nearest by, a woman picked the e-wallet, like she saw, like, a wallet falling from, someone, and she quickly picked the wallet, only to stash it in her handbag. So that was captured by our CCTVs, about the CCTV cameras. And with the lack of empathy, you would say maybe that person who lost that wallet was, like entirely trusting or to also tengela, I don't know, maybe her household, about some groceries or cover whatsoever family necessities for that matter. But again, that lack of empathy within us has proven our emotional intelligence is very, very lacking within the wide spectrum of our society. We don't care for each other. Basically, we don't give a F, for one another. So yeah, living in that sort of environment, within a society that have conditioned us to perceive our emotions as a source of weakness. We've been hearing, things like, why are you being emotional? Or why are you being sensitive? It was just a joke. Why are you being emotional? She's so emotional. He's so emotional, as though emotions are this, package of things that needs to be suspended way out of the human, spectrum of existence. But I don't think that's correct, because right from the beginning, when you check it, our emotions have played, the fundamental role now in teaching us, a whole lot that we are aware of today. I mean, like, from an early age, right at infantry, we used to communicate with our mothers via our feelings. We used to cry whenever we were hungry, whenever we felt the situation maybe, exposed us to danger. We used to communicate with those emotional feelings. So what are emotions? Basically, what are emotions? I think emotions are that anti-matter part within us, using endocrine and nervous system, with other body organs, with how they secrete these hormonal, or rather the endocrine hormonal glands or glandular, glandular systems, and then forming some sort of moods, forming some sort of my temperaments. It's variation of given times, and basically they are the an integral part of what makes up the microcosm in order to be complete. So my emotions, they are not a source of weakness. Yeah, as fragile as they may be, but they are crucially needed within the completion of a microcosm of a human being. With the faculty of the behavioral psychology, it is detected that most of what we know, a large percentage of what we know today, comes from, the power of observation at an early age, like at a very, very tender age, via the power of observation before we even learned on how to utter a single word. That's why it is said that kids who grow up in a family household where now they used to observe their fathers beating up their mothers, and the family feud, household violence, all of that, vulgar, most usually those kids are much more likely to grow up to be bullies at school, at the wide spectrum of the society, and to be these like malicious people, basically. Yeah, when they grow up, they don't do well in relationships, they filled with rage, anger, narcissistic tendencies, chauvinistic tendencies in men, contemptuous behavioral patterns, in women, like, stuff like that, because we tend to, to pick on our, parents' vices at an early age, So all of that sort of like contribute to our emotional makeup. So our emotions, they are vital aspects now that contribute into making up our psyche, the psychical ocean of our emotions. So these passions, they just like a wide, a vast ocean of signals, you know what I mean? And then they get to be triggered now in the brain. And when I'm talking about the brain, we have two brains. We have the emotional brain and we also have the intellectual brain. It is said that at ancient times, our ancestors, our foreparents, they used to coexist and cohabit with other animals, vicious animals, that is to say, your lions, your leopards, your your tigers, your saber-tooth, and like, given that sort of environment to live in, one would be much more prone into now exerting now this emotional response called fear, and fear is low vibratory response or frequency, produced by the emotional brain. We're talking about the limbic system now, the lower parts of the brain, the third ventricle that forms what they call the basal ganglia, the limbic system. Basically, the word limbic is derived from the ancient Latin, meaning that the limbus, the ring. That's why the limbic system, where now the spinal cord terminates, when this symmetry of the round, the circular circuitry, basically it's the limbic circuitry. So that is the region now, in the head, in the human head. That is the region of the limbic, what they call the limbic system. It's the emotional brain. Most importantly, it houses an organ known as the amygdala. The amygdala is this organ that is responsible for the producing of fear, phobias, post-traumatic stresses, on how we respond to such events that reminds us of other events that sparked those stresses, stress disorders. It houses, the amygdala also is responsible, for the stimulation of that flight and fight response. So with how it happens, that an average human uses like the five senses, right? That is now before learning, we would say, hey, beyond my five senses, there is the sixth sense, seventh sense, eighth sense, and to infinity, So an average human, to make this much more appealing even to a layman, with the five senses, the much of what shapes our internal consciousness, our awareness, and the happenings of, the body, the psychology, the psyche, is much more influenced by an external stimuli, what is happening, on the external level. So whether it taste, smell, touch, hearing, these signals, they come as electrical signals. They are going to be accepted by these five senses, which in turn send them into the thalamus. But the thalamus is stimulated by amygdala. That's why amygdala, they call it the sentinel of the brain. Whatsoever signal, electrical signals, as I said, whether touch, taste, smell, sight, blah blah blah. You understand? First have to be taken via the threshold of the amygdala, which sort of like primes us about to be aware of the, either the danger of the situation, or that will that situation be favorable to us. Ancient people, ancient societies, there were people who thrived with the limbic system. I mean, like, imagine you're walking on the street and then you bumped into a lion. For sure, that's a flight or fight response would be triggered, which sort of like, activate the amygdala, to be at sway, so one will either take, flight, you flee, you run, or you fight the lion. You still have the Kenyan Messiahs who still hunt some lion today, but I think what's within that deliberation, there is mechanisms, of the neuronal precautions. We don't just, go straight to the lion. Maybe they need to be, a clique of us. I need my own, my own group. Yeah, my own entourage. Yeah. So why is that? That's because at then it was an epoch, it was an era when our human beings, primarily used to thrive out of the limbic system, the emotional brain, basically. And secondly, we do have the intellectual brain. Now, talking about the cortical region, the neocortex of the brain, the top part, over a limbic system in the brain, the human brain. So is associated much more with rationality, logic. We have to rationalize whatsoever that we feel. Other than that, we would be having people walking as time bombs, busting out, depending on the flight or fight mode. So that this is what the Matrix movie was trying to show or showcase to us. That guy wasn't only just by accident, or a coincidence. From the limbic system, that wavery ocean of like disorder. Sometimes my emotions can, form a disorder, like internally. So we need to jump or leap out of that those murky waters of a disorder, and find irrationality. This is where now we tend to be at the horizons of the two spheres. Now the neocortex got two spheres. Hence Neo was brought forth, the two Morpheus who produced the right hand with the left hand, the blue pill and the red pill. This is where now you get to grow up to distinguish what is right from what is wrong. Basically, the neocortex is most vital for the, the shaping of immorality within us. Knowing how to ethically choose what is right, and dispel that what is wrong. So being, at that verge now where you escape the matrix of the limbic, we understand, and go to the higher regions of the neocortex where you rationalize things. But that is not to say we are escaping our emotions way too. Now, in terms of viewing them as something that is, distasteful. No, it's nothing like that. So whenever now the whenever the electrical signals from the outer stimuli, gets to be accepted by the thalamus, triggered by amygdala, this rush, most especially during those life threatening emergencies, the amygdala produces now mechanisms, hormonal mechanisms, such as like the epinephrines and neuropinephrines. Neuropinephrines, they are responsible for that feeling, for most usually the fight wing within the fight and flight mode we are on. So sometimes we become so irritated, or irritable to other people's speeches or other people's expressions, even though those people, they do not mean any harm or bad to us, but because we feel good now, our beliefs, our philosophies, are being put at threat, are being challenged, so therefore we need to fight, even though when in fact if that sort of expression from that person, or speech from that person was looked at in another viewpoint, everything would have proved otherwise. So the flight and fight mode. So now when the amygdala triggers these responses, and all of that information, that influx of information forms a rush to our prefrontal cortex, prefrontal lobes, which are now in duality. We have the right prefrontal lobe, we have the left prefrontal lobe. The right prefrontal lobe basically is a negative lobe, whereas you have the left one, which is the positive, because we are also electromagnetic beings, meaning it's also about the work of positive and negative, and within now in your cortex, the region of the two spheres. So the rush from amygdala, whenever we are prompted to suddenly react without rationalizing, things or circumstances, during the life's emergencies, the emotional rush will send the influx of messages. Now, when it touches, in the case where it touches the left prefrontal lobe, this is where now we tend to calm down, because the left prefrontal lobe is associated now with scrutinizing the rage, the anger, anxieties, depression, all of those negative low vibratory emotions. They call it a sentinel, it's like a guard at the door. Nothing will pass without being questioned, by this guard. So that is what the left, the prefrontal lobe essentially is capable of doing. Whereas the right prefrontal lobe, is more of like a doorway. You understand that gets to be widened up. I wanted to let the rage, like a dragon breathing in the fire. Let the rage to come out. That's why it is referred to as the negative lobe. So it is essential now to gravitate to axioms, statements like know thyself. But now the subsequent question that should follow after that is knowing what exactly? Knowing the dynamics, the happenings, the complexities, the intricate happenings, occurrences within the microcosm. Learn the body, learn the mind. This is why now the ancient Kemites have built now at the place called Luxor. They built the temple of man. So they've built this temple in a symmetric form that represents like a human being. Now at the particularly at the head region, at the head region, they fashioned it into two parts. The lower part had 12 pylons. It was an architectural structure with 12 pylons, using the divine proportions of the golden ratio, 1.618, with the square roots of 2, 3, and 5. Yeah, these 12 pylons basically they at the head region. The lower part represents the 12 optical nerves that we use yabona leyo nto, via the red retina and the visual cortex that interprets the mixture, the amalgamation of pixels and make forms. Hence we can see what's okay. This is a form of a cup, this is a form of a car, this is a form of a human being. This is color pink, this is color yellow, this is color purple. So they knew that because they knew about the microcosm, they gave themselves time to study the microcosm. Then the upper part, constructed with the architectural structure of pylons I8 with the same divine ratio, but now using number 8 and 9, which are crucial in the what they call the solfeggio musical scale. We have on 8 and 9 represents the first notes on the solfeggio musical scale. So architecture basically uses the sound waves as well. We have on the ancient building of the ancient cathedrals, ancient edifices. We have on they knew about these things basically. Mathematics is also involved. We have on sound science is also involved. We have on all of those as an external stimuli can have a tremendous impact in now shaping our emotional states. And remember, our emotional states, they form a psyche. Our psyche forms that antimatter, the astral realm within now the microcosm, the plane of the stars, the starry plane within us, where we go to sleep, when we astral travel, when we lucid dream, we get it to be suspended in that astral plane within us, because we detach from the beta brainwave, which is the wake state, the lower state, and to other realms, to other brain functionalities or brain waves. So it is important to know the workings of the brain and how does the mind function. So on top of that limbic system, the emotional brain. Remember I said we got two brains. So the second brain, I'd say, is the intellectual brain. This is where now we tend to rationalize things. This is where now when the messages, the influx of those reaching influxes coming from the triggering amygdala, where we found now ourselves acting out of control, spiraling out of control. Those emotions that drives us to perform in a rampant way. We are not monitored, and there will be feeling of regret thereafter. So now when the amygdala flashes the rush of these impulsive emotions, when it's a case of now them reaching the left prefrontal cortex, prefrontal lobe. Remember we said the left prefrontal lobe acts as a sentinel that guards, that questions everything that needs to be expressed out. This is where now we get to see somebody walking, away, right amidst the heated up conversation or argument. After that brief moment of questioning, we could say, hey, is it worth it? Stuff like that. So that is what we refer to when we talk about the emotional intelligence. To control this raging ocean of my emotions, sometimes triggered by this device called the amygdala, that triggers fear, that triggers our phobias, that triggers all sorts of flight or fight mode or responses. The society that we live in has conditioned us basically to use an access of like amygdala. We fear the government, we fear the police, we fear. Actually, I don't even know how we jumped from rational fear. I know it might sound odd, but at the expense of something so cliche by, terming it the rational fear. I mean, like at ancient times when, a person will, bump into a lion, he or she will have to run, in order to save the self. That's rational for me, according to my own, rational observation. So, I don't know how we jumped from death now into this era of irrational fear, you understand, where we are induced into an environment whereby we fear the government, we fear the police, people who should be protecting and serving us, we fear the economy, our like socio-economical climate, is a steep slope. You understand that inflation might strike anytime at any given time. So how the rand, how the dollar, fluctuates with with the COVID-19 that have left like so many people in the state of despondency and despair. People like a wide range of around, have lost their jobs. Living now in smithereens today. That sort of social welfare that was shaken, which sort of like introduced abantu into a state of now social fear and anxieties. A person will drop your wallet just as what took place. I saw recently at the mall, the nearby mall. You understand that like a person picked up that wallet, and stashed it inside her wallet, there without giving any regard to the empathy. Maybe that person was entirely dependent on that money to feed her own family. So we no longer operate within those empathetic parameters any longer, because we lack of emotional intelligence in this society. So the saying know thyself refers to knowing these inner mechanisms and knowing how to balance now these two brains, the emotional brain, the limbic system, and the cortical region, which is the intellectual brain. So yeah, give thanks for observing and watching this. Please like, share, subscribe, and interact until we see each other again on the next episode. I thank you very much. Bless. Before the dawn of the sun, I keep my eye on the moon, taking off on latitude like the witch on the broom, flying balloon, solar disc rising over lagoon, bending a spoon, God is thought, a symbol of the baboon. Man in sky.